The default Old Soul versus New Gen template provides a basic horizontal slider interface. In this default setup, the physical layout and the mathematical rules governing the user interaction are locked to a very specific horizontal 5-row format. We are going to transform that basic structure into a fully customized, vertically oriented throwback versus modern interface. To reach that final state, we will execute 3 steps: replacing the standard visual assets with custom UI, manipulating the internal logic nodes to reorient the physical layout, and engineering a dynamic scoring system that calculates the user's choices. Mastering the visual scripting mechanics allows you to strip away the constraints of standard templates. You control the logic, which means you can build a proprietary, reactive experience from the ground up. Inside the visual script panel, the mechanics of dragging begin at the XBound subgraph and the drag trigger node. Here, a split vector node specifically isolates the x-axis coordinate. This node restricts the slider's physical movement, forcing it to travel strictly on a horizontal plane between a set minimum and maximum numerical value. If you configure those boundary limits to exceed your visual asset, the slider loses its physical constraints and slides straight off the intended track. The logic boundaries must perfectly match the physical length of your visual line. To understand how the software physically registers a user's touch, we need to inspect the individual slider subgraphs. A computer only recognizes interaction at an image's exact microscopic center. If a user taps elsewhere, the interaction fails. The script solves this by calculating a hit zone, taking the physical height of the icon, dividing by 2, and adding and subtracting that from the center X position. An if condition node reads this zone. When touched inside these boundaries, the script commands the asset to instantly snap to the touch coordinate. Calculating and coding this invisible spatial buffer determines whether an interface feels completely broken or totally frictionless to the user. With the logic mapped, we can adjust the aesthetics. Select the asset you want to replace in the Objects panel, navigate to the Properties panel, and click Replace Asset to upload your new graphic. You must immediately rename your newly imported asset. Skipping this step will cause cascading reference errors throughout your visual script. To shift the structural layout from horizontal to vertical, we need to free up physical space. Delete 2 of the existing sliders from the UI, and then remove their corresponding subgraphs from the visual script. This chart shows the logic swap needed to reorient the sliders. In the visual script, unplug the split vector Y output and route it into the boundary nodes instead of X. Next, set precise numerical boundaries for the vertical format, capping the coordinates between -180 and 140 to prevent exceeding screen height. Now go inside every single slider subgraph. You must replace all getX and setX coordinate nodes with their Y-axis equivalents. Swapping out the PNG files changes the aesthetic, but manipulating these spatial coordinate paths is what physically rewires the behavior of the digital environment. To give the user a final result, build a new text object in the UI. Name it Final Score and set the default text to 0. This diagram illustrates the scoring equation. A frame update node constantly reads the Y positions of all 3 active sliders, adding them and dividing by 3 for a raw average spatial coordinate. Because a raw coordinate is difficult to read, a remap node takes those spatial coordinates and translates them into a clean 0 to 100% metric. Next, configure the final trigger logic using a record node. When the user starts recording, this node forces the title card visibility to false and simultaneously sets your calculated final score text to true. Binding raw calculation loops to physical user actions is the exact mechanism that elevates a passive visual effect into an interactive experience. Run a final validation check. Confirm that hitting the record button successfully triggers the visibility swap and outputs the final calculated percentage. Move to the publishing metadata. Upload your custom thumbnail icon, define a searchable name, and write a clear description. This mockup highlights the most crucial publishing setting. To guarantee platform compatibility, the interaction instruction dropdown must be explicitly set to drag. By deconstructing the mathematical rules and rewiring the base templates, you bypass generic formats entirely to architect personalized interactive software.